morning we are in a late model JK with a LT1 10-speed. What an amazing combination. The last three test drives I did were LS's. I did two 6.0s and an LS3. And then I drove my JK, which I like a lot. It's got an L9H in it, which is a 6.2 LS 6-speed. And you don't really realize how good the LT1 is with a 10-speed until you drive those other vehicles and then get back into an LT1. The power delivery is just amazing. Now don't get me wrong, there's engines out there with more horsepower, but when it comes to refinement, drivability, economy, emissions, you look at everything combined, and the LT1, it just has to be top of the pile. If you were to blindfold drivers and you put them in an LS, a Hemi, a 6-cylinder, and then an LT1 with a 10-speed, there would be no competition. As soon as you touched the throttle and felt that massive torque right off the line, and no matter what speed you're going at, you give it a little throttle and it instantly takes off because of all the technology in the LT. We're getting on the freeway here, and it used to be a challenge with a V6 in a JK with 40s, but check out how effortless this LT1 pulls onto the highway, and especially try to note the shifting. Just a little bit of throttle. That was 3 or 4 gears, I don't even know. It's so smooth you can't tell. But before you know it, you're going the speed limit or faster. It's just so amazingly effortless. And then it'll cruise all day. And I have driven these things 1,000 miles in a day, and it's just very, very comfortable. Motec did its first LT swap in March of 2016, and back then there was some ambiguity about where the market was going to go. Well, I can wholeheartedly say that today the LT, especially the LT1 and the 10-speed, or even an L86 and a 10-speed, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is got to be the top of the food chain when it comes to engine conversions. There's swaps out there that are easier to do. There's swaps out there that have more horsepower. But when it comes down to actual drivability, this is just an amazing, amazing combination. So the late model JK I'm in is very nice. It drives great. And the customer supercharged it to get more power, like a lot of you do. The difference between a supercharged V6 and a LT1 is about as diverse as you can get. And there's everything in between. There's the LS's, there's the Hemis, there's the power adders. Now I will say this, if you were to compare this new 10-speed to pretty much any of the previous transmissions, now I'm a big fan of the 6L80, and I've heard guys talk smack about the 6L80, but it's an excellent transmission. It's got diverse gearing, it's very strong. A lot of guys say, oh, the 4L80, the 4L60. No, the 6L80, and we actually did some 4-speed swaps way early on when we first started doing these, because the 6L80s weren't around in quantity. And pretty much everybody that did a 4-speed upgraded to the 6L80. So the 6L80 is a great transmission. But these new 10-speeds just take the conversion to a new level. And you can't compare it to the Chrysler 4-speed. You can't compare it to the Chrysler 5-speed. The Chrysler 8-speed, I've driven them. I have one in my JL, and they're not bad transmissions, but they're still not on the same level as a 10L80 in my opinion. The 10L80 was a group effort by Ford and GM, and I believe Honda and Toyota went in it. A lot of technology went into the 10L80. Lightweight components. They reduced the diameter of components like the converter to keep the weight and the centrifugal force down. It's a very advanced transmission. You combine that with an engine that has double the torque of a 3.8 V6 at low RPM, and it's just amazing. Like, I'm cruising along right here in Red Rock at the speed limit, and if I just give it a little throttle, you can see there's no hesitation. It just, no matter what speed you're at, you give it a little bit of throttle and it goes. So this video is about the LT1 10-speed, and let me back up and say it also includes the L86. We were able to secure some L86s in the shop, and the L86 is virtually identical to the LT1. We put the LT1 intake on it. You can't really tell the difference. We can run the vacuum port off the LT1 intake, and I've driven dozens of them, and I can't tell the difference between the way the two perform. So if you want to save a couple of dollars, go with the L86 LT1 build, and you'll save money and have the same performance as the LT1. Like everything else, the LT 6.2s have been refined over the years. The early 14, 15, 16s, while they ran really good, they didn't have the refinement of the later ones. The second generation 10-speed transmission is, like I said, amazing. And when you combine it with the new LT1 or L86, now they did change the cam phasers in the LT1s to match the L87. I don't know what that does physically. I think it was more an economy for parts so that they shared the same phasers. But in any event, these engines are really approaching the drivability of an electric motor, where you have massive torque and instant power no matter where you're at in the power band. And that's really not something I've experienced with any of the other powertrains. The Hemis, even with the 8-speed, the LSs with a 6-speed, they just don't have the refinement. They don't have that instant torque. They don't have the sound. It's interesting with an LT, when you give it a little bit of throttle, it has grunt to it. It's like a diesel, where it phases the cam, it starts pulling pretty hard, and you just hear this low rumble. It doesn't downshift and rev up and start screaming like the earlier model engines. Now, I will say that the old model engines are really becoming obsolete. When I say the last generation engines, I'm talking about the Hemis and the LSs. They're just not in the same league as the LT, and the writing's on the wall for a Hemi, from what I understand, and the LSs are getting long in the tooth and getting more miles on the used engines, and the new engines are becoming scarce. Doesn't bother me at all, because with these LTs being available, you're not losing anything. All you're doing is gaining. You're gaining economy, you're gaining torque, you're gaining horsepower, you're gaining drivability. There just is no downside. And I can say in the next couple of years, I just don't see anything else in competition with this powertrain. I'm going to keep this video short because I sound like I'm bragging to myself. But after driving these LSs for the last couple of weeks, and yes, I've been driving some Chrysler stuff. After driving all this stuff around and getting into this LT1 10-speed, it's just amazing. You guys really need to get into one and drive it, and you'll see what we're talking about. Motec's new mission goal is going to be to try to rationalize the LT1 swap for the masses. Bring the price down, and that's kind of tough today because of what's going on in our economy. But the reality is we are way over demand, meaning our supply is just a small amount of the demand that we have. So guys are going with superchargers, guys are going with Hemis, guys are going with LSs and whatever. But really it's up to us right now to try to step this technology up. We have the technology. We make our own electronics in-house, our own modules. We code them in-house. We use factory harnesses and computers, as you guys know. So it's just a matter now of trying to put all this together where we can sell them in volume. That's been our biggest problem, is we don't have the supply, and a lot of that is because of the supply chain, but a lot of it is also because we need to step up our resources. So we're going to try to do that and gain economies, which will, if nothing else, hold the price where it's at, but hopefully reduce the price, but increase the volume so that more of you guys can enjoy this conversion. And another one of our commitments is going to be to simplify the swap as much as possible. It's no secret that the LT is more advanced than the other engines that are regularly put in the JK, whether it's the LS or the Hemi. So those engines are easier to install. But the advantage of the LT is it's a superior powertrain. That's all there is to it. But it is slightly more complex. Now we've got the wiring down and we've got the modules down. We got everything figured out. That's not a problem anymore. What we're trying to do is streamline production so we can make these things in the hundreds rather than in the dozens. We will be coming out with some new modules, which really aren't new. Our new V5 module is a V3 module, but which we've been making for, I think, since 2016 or 17. But we're putting it in a aluminum case and potting it so we can run it in the engine compartment. That way we can reduce the wire, the amount of wire in the vehicle going into the cab. We will be making custom enclosures for our power distribution centers. And guys, let me say this, when I started Motec back in 2009, it was my retirement business. I had run automotive shops for 30 years, and I was a high-level emissions inspector and diagnostic technician. I owned a bunch of shops, and they were very successful. When I sold those shops, I wanted something to do because you can't retire, right? So I started Motec, and it just exploded. And now, over a decade later, it's growing even faster because as the JKs age and guys pay them off, woefully apparent that the JK is underpowered, we're getting more and more demand. So I really tried to keep a cap on Motec's growth because I have a family and I have other responsibilities. But it's become apparent that this is a need. this is definitely something that you guys want. We don't advertise, as you know. All we have is this YouTube channel. So the biggest complaints we get from our customers is we're out months and months on these builds, and I think we're out a month or two on kits. We want to get to the point, and this is multifaceted. One, where we can ship product quickly. Two, where we rationalize the swap. We've been doing this so long, it's kind of second nature to us, and most of our installers know how to install these engines, but a lot of you guys have never done this, and you don't, and our instructions aren't the best. We do have instructions, and most guys successfully do the swap with them, but what we want to do is we want to distill those instructions down to almost plug and play, easy, stereotype instructions. We want you to have the highest chance of success and the easiest install process. As you know, we pioneered the easy install hardware with our bolt-in engine mounts, no drilling, no cutting, no welding. Everybody else is following suit. Pretty much everything Motec does, the rest of the industry goes to over the following years. So we want to do the same thing with the electronics. We are running GM harnesses. It's plug and play at the power distribution center. It's plug and play at the computer. We do have a couple of custom connectors in there. And what we're doing is we're relaying everything out, not to make anything better, because we're really not making anything better. We're making it easier. And by making it easier means you can install it faster, shops can make more money, and we're hoping to increase production to the point that our wait time gets to less than a month. So that's our commitment right now. We're going to do our best in the next year to achieve that goal. I will say that the parts supply chain has been throwing us for a loop, whether it's transmissions or engines or whatever. We've just kind of been rolling with whatever's available at the time. So we're going to work with those supply chain issues, try to increase production, and try to distill this LT swap down to the simplicity of a Hemi or an LS. Because at the end of the day, there just is no comparison. And I've driven them all, and I can tell you, whether it's supercharged, turbocharged, Hemi, LS, 4, 5, 6-speed, 8-speed, there's nothing that tops this combination. In fact, nothing really comes even close. I think that you would have to say that in most categories, the LT has a double-digit lead over the other vehicles. In my opinion, the LT has an advantage by a wide margin. Not just talking about horsepower, not just talking about torque. I'm talking about the whole package, drivability, etc. You're going to be so happy driving an LT 10-speed on the highway. It'll eat the miles up. The reports I'm getting from my customers is that our LT 8 and 10 speeds with the 6.2 are getting better mileage with 38 and 40-inch tires than stock Wrangler JL Hemis. And understand, we're not trying to hack, hybrid, modify. We're trying to run these things the way GM intended them. And when you do that, you have the failure modes, you have OE harnesses. We're working with a harness right now that was from an aftermarket supplier. It's got 2 fuses running the whole thing, maybe 3. We blew a fuse, and who knows what circuit's being blown. There aren't redundant ground paths. There aren't redundant power distribution. It's just, we run the whole package. Taking an LT and dumbing it down to a port-injected engine, yeah, that it has power and all that, but it's just, you can't compare it. So the LT really is the top of the pile in the engine conversion world as of today, in my opinion, and will be for the next couple of years. We're going to take this JK to the mountain. We're going to see you shortly.